The alarm clock screamed at 5:30 a.m., but Jake Thompson was already wide awake. He had been lying in bed for the past hour thinking about his shiny new Harley-Davidson, parked outside his apartment. The black motorcycle with bright orange flames painted on the gas tank was his pride and joy. Jake had saved every penny from his construction job for 2 years just to buy this machine. Now, at 28 years old, he finally had the bike of his dreams. Jake jumped out of bed and pulled on his leather jacket. The jacket was covered with metal studs and had a skull design on the back. He thought it made him look tough and dangerous. Jake grabbed his helmet but decided not to wear it. He liked the feeling of wind rushing through his dark hair when he rode fast. Besides, helmets were for scared people, and Jake was not scared of anything. The sun was just starting to peek over the horizon as Jake walked outside. The morning air was cool and fresh. Most people in Maplewood were still sleeping peacefully in their warm beds. The streets were empty and quiet. This was exactly what Jake loved about riding early in the morning. He could go as fast as he wanted without anyone telling him to slow down. Jake threw his leg over the motorcycle and turned the key. The engine roared to life with a deep rumbling sound that echoed off the nearby buildings. He revved the engine several times just to hear the powerful noise it made. The sound made him feel strong and important. Jake smiled as he imagined how impressed people would be when they saw him riding past their windows. He pulled out of the parking lot and onto Main Street. At first, Jake rode at a normal speed, but that quickly became boring. He twisted the throttle and felt the motorcycle surge forward like a wild animal. The speedometer needle climbed from 30 to 45 to 60 miles per hour. Jake laughed out loud as he flew past the speed limit signs that clearly said 25 miles per hour. The empty road stretched out in front of him like his own personal racetrack. Jake leaned into the curves and felt the thrill of danger as his knee almost touched the ground. He had been riding motorcycles since he was 16 years old, but he had never owned one this powerful before. Every twist of his wrist sent him shooting forward faster than ever. Jake decided to take his favorite route through the residential area of Maplewood. The houses were small and neat with white picket fences and flower gardens. Children lived in these houses with their parents and grandparents, families who worked hard and followed all the rules. Jake thought these people were boring. They drove slow cars and went to bed early and never took any risks in their lives. As he roared down Elm Street, Jake pulled out his cell phone. He wanted to take a video of himself riding so he could post it on social media later. His friends would be so jealous when they saw how fast he was going. Jake held the phone up with one hand while steering with the other. The motorcycle wobbled slightly, but he did not care. He was young and strong, and nothing bad could happen to him. The houses flew by in a blur of colors. Jake saw bedroom windows with curtains still closed. He saw porches with rocking chairs and bicycles left outside by sleeping children. He saw perfectly cut grass and mailboxes painted in bright colors. Everything looked so peaceful and safe. Jake felt like he was the only person alive in the whole world. He turned onto Maple Street and gave the engine more gas. The motorcycle responded immediately, shooting forward even faster. Jake felt invincible as he raced toward the morning sun. He had no idea that his reckless ride was about to change his life forever. In just a few minutes, he would meet someone from his past in the most terrible way possible. Eleanor Martinez slowly opened her eyes as the first rays of sunlight crept through her bedroom curtains. At 67 years old, she had developed the habit of waking up early even though she no longer needed to go to work. Her body ached as she sat up in bed. The arthritis in her knees and hands always felt worse in the morning. She reached for the bottle of pain medicine on her nightstand and swallowed 2 pills with a sip of water. From downstairs, Eleanor could hear the soft padding of paws on the kitchen floor. Buddy was already awake and waiting for his morning walk. The golden retriever had been her faithful companion for 8 wonderful years. Eleanor smiled as she remembered the day she first brought Buddy home from the animal shelter. He had been just a puppy then, with big brown eyes and a wagging tail that never seemed to stop moving. Eleanor put on her pink slippers and slowly made her way down the wooden stairs. Each step sent a sharp pain through her arthritic knees, but she had learned to live with the discomfort. Buddy was sitting by the back door with his red leash in his mouth. His tail was wagging so hard that his whole body was wiggling with excitement. Eleanor laughed softly at the sight of her eager friend. "Good morning, my sweet boy," she said as she scratched behind Buddy's ears. The dog's fur was golden like sunshine and incredibly soft to touch. "Are you ready for our walk?" Eleanor asked. Buddy barked once in response and dropped the leash at her feet. He knew their routine perfectly. Every morning at exactly 7 a.m., they would take their walk around the neighborhood together. Eleanor put on her light blue jacket and picked up her wooden walking cane. The cane had belonged to her late husband Robert, who had passed away 3 years ago. Using his cane made her feel like he was still with her on their daily walks. She clipped Buddy's leash to his collar and opened the front door. The morning air was fresh and cool against her face. The neighborhood was just starting to wake up. Eleanor could see lights turning on in kitchen windows as families prepared breakfast. She loved this peaceful time of day when everything felt calm and safe. Buddy walked slowly beside her, matching her careful pace. He was a patient dog who never pulled on his leash or rushed ahead. It was as if he understood that Eleanor needed to move slowly because of her old bones. They walked past the Johnson house where Mrs. Johnson was already watering her rose garden. Eleanor waved and called out good morning. Mrs. Johnson waved back with a friendly smile. Next, they passed the Davis house where Mr. Davis was picking up his morning newspaper. He tipped his hat politely as Eleanor and Buddy walked by. Everyone in the neighborhood knew Eleanor and her gentle dog. Buddy stopped to sniff at his favorite fire hydrant, while Eleanor admired the beautiful flower gardens that lined the street. The roses were blooming in shades of red and pink. The daisies were bright white with yellow centers. Everything looked so pretty in the soft morning light. Eleanor felt grateful for these quiet moments of peace with her beloved companion. As they reached the corner of Elm and Maple Street, Eleanor heard a strange sound in the distance. It sounded like a motorcycle engine revving loudly. The noise seemed to be getting closer and closer. Buddy's ears perked up, and he looked around nervously. Eleanor patted his head gently to calm him down. She had no idea that the approaching motorcycle would change both their lives forever in just a few terrible seconds. The roaring sound of Jake's motorcycle grew louder and louder as he raced down Elm Street. He was going nearly 60 miles per hour in a neighborhood where children played and families lived peacefully. His eyes were focused on his phone screen instead of the road ahead. Jake was trying to get the perfect angle for his video, while steering with just one hand. The motorcycle wobbled dangerously from side to side, but Jake thought he was in complete control. Eleanor and Buddy had just stepped into the crosswalk at the corner of Elm and Maple Street. The crosswalk was clearly marked with white painted lines and bright yellow warning signs. Eleanor always used this same crossing on their morning walks. She had been walking this route safely for years without any problems. Buddy walked calmly beside her, staying close to her left side, like the good dog he was. Jake came flying around the corner at full speed. His motorcycle engine was screaming like an angry beast. The sound echoed off the houses and shattered the peaceful morning silence. Birds flew away from the trees in fear. A cat that had been sitting on a porch ran and hid under a car. The loud noise was scary and wrong in this quiet neighborhood. Eleanor looked up when she heard the terrible sound approaching. Her eyes went wide with fear as she saw the black motorcycle with orange flames racing straight toward them. Time seemed to slow down as Eleanor realized they were in terrible danger. She tried to move faster, but her arthritis made her legs stiff and slow. Her wooden cane tapped frantically on the pavement as she struggled to get out of the way. Buddy saw the danger before Eleanor did. The loyal dog's protective instincts kicked in immediately. He had spent 8 years loving and protecting his elderly owner. Without hesitation, Buddy jumped in front of Eleanor to shield her from the approaching motorcycle. His golden fur caught the morning sunlight as he bravely placed himself between Eleanor and the speeding machine. Jake finally looked up from his phone just in time to see the elderly woman and her dog directly in front of him. His heart jumped into his throat as panic flooded his body. He yanked the handlebars hard to the right and squeezed the brakes as tight as he could. The motorcycle's tires screamed against the asphalt as Jake fought to avoid hitting them. Rubber smoke filled the air with a burning smell. But it was too late. Jake had been going too fast, and he was too close to stop in time. The front wheel of his motorcycle clipped Buddy's back legs with a sickening thud. The brave dog let out a sharp yelp of pain as the impact sent him tumbling across the hard pavement. His golden body rolled several times before coming to rest near the curb. Eleanor screamed at the top of her lungs. The sound was filled with terror and heartbreak. She dropped her walking cane and fell to her knees beside her injured companion. Buddy was whimpering softly and trying to lift his head, but his back leg was bent at a horrible angle. Blood was starting to stain his beautiful golden fur. Jake managed to keep his motorcycle upright after the collision. His heart was pounding so hard he thought it might explode. He looked back over his shoulder and saw the elderly woman crying over her hurt dog. For a split second, Jake thought about stopping to help, but fear took control of his mind. Instead of doing the right thing, Jake twisted the throttle and sped away from the scene. He disappeared around the next corner, leaving Eleanor alone with her badly injured pet. Eleanor's knees hit the cold pavement hard as she dropped down beside Buddy. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably as she reached out to touch her beloved companion. Tears streamed down her wrinkled cheeks as she saw the terrible condition her faithful friend was in. Buddy's back leg was twisted in a way that made Eleanor's stomach turn. The bone was clearly broken and sticking out at an angle that looked very wrong. "Buddy, my sweet boy," Eleanor whispered through her sobs. Her voice was barely audible as she gently stroked his soft golden fur. The dog was breathing heavily and whimpering with each breath he took. His beautiful brown eyes looked up at Eleanor with pain and confusion. He did not understand why he was hurting so badly. All he knew was that his loving owner was crying, and that made him sad too. Blood was slowly spreading across Buddy's golden coat, making dark red stains on his fur. Eleanor could see scratches and cuts all over his body from where he had tumbled across the rough pavement. His front paws had scrapes that were bleeding. There was a deep cut on his side that looked very serious. Eleanor felt sick as she realized how badly her precious dog was injured. The sound of Eleanor's screams had woken up the entire neighborhood. Mrs. Johnson came running from her house, still wearing her pink bathrobe and fuzzy slippers. Her face was filled with shock and concern when she saw Eleanor kneeling beside the injured dog. Mr. Davis rushed over from across the street, carrying his cell phone in his hand. His gray hair was messy from sleep, but he was wide awake now. "Oh my goodness, what happened?" Mrs. Johnson asked as she knelt down beside Eleanor. Her voice was full of worry and fear. Eleanor tried to speak, but only sobs came out of her mouth. She pointed down the street where the motorcycle had disappeared. The man on the motorcycle hit Buddy, and then he drove away, she finally managed to say between her tears. Mr. Davis was already dialing 911 on his phone. His fingers moved quickly as he called for help. "We need an ambulance and the police right away," he said into the phone. "There has been a hit-and-run accident involving a dog at the corner of Elm and Maple Street. The dog is badly injured and needs medical attention immediately." More neighbors started coming out of their houses when they heard the commotion. Mrs. Chen from next door brought a soft blanket to cover Buddy and keep him warm. Mr. Rodriguez offered to drive Eleanor and Buddy to the emergency animal hospital. Everyone in the neighborhood loved Eleanor and Buddy. They all wanted to help in any way they could. Eleanor continued to pet Buddy's head gently while they waited for help to arrive. "Stay with me, sweet boy," she whispered to him. "You are going to be okay. I promise we will get you to the doctor, and they will fix your leg." Buddy tried to wag his tail when he heard Eleanor's voice, but the movement caused him too much pain. He let out another soft whimper that broke Eleanor's heart even more. The sound of sirens could be heard in the distance, getting closer and closer. Help was coming, but Eleanor was terrified that it might be too late. Buddy's breathing was getting weaker and his eyes were starting to close. Eleanor prayed silently that her faithful companion would survive this terrible morning. She could not imagine her life without the dog who had been her best friend for so many years. Detective Sarah Chen pulled her police car up to the corner of Elm and Maple Street exactly 1 hour after the accident happened. She was 34 years old and had been working as a police detective for 7 years. Sarah was known throughout the police department as someone who never gave up on a case. When other detectives got tired or frustrated, Sarah kept working until she found the answers she was looking for. The ambulance had already taken Eleanor and Buddy to the emergency animal hospital. Sarah could see dark red stains on the pavement where the injured dog had been lying. There were also black tire marks from where the motorcycle had braked hard before hitting Buddy. Sarah took out her camera and started taking pictures of everything she could see. Mrs. Johnson was still standing near the scene wrapped in her pink bathrobe. Her eyes were red from crying as she watched the detective work. Sarah walked over to her with a small notebook in her hand. "Can you tell me exactly what you saw this morning?" Sarah asked in a gentle voice. She always spoke kindly to witnesses because she knew they were often scared or upset. "I heard Eleanor screaming and ran outside," Mrs. Johnson said. Her voice was shaky as she remembered the terrible scene. "I saw her kneeling beside Buddy, who was badly hurt. Eleanor told me that a man on a motorcycle hit her dog and then drove away without stopping." Mrs. Johnson wiped her eyes with a tissue as she spoke. Sarah wrote down every word that Mrs. Johnson said. "Can you describe the motorcycle or the person who was riding it?" she asked. Mrs. Johnson thought for a moment before answering. "It was a big black motorcycle with orange flames painted on the gas tank. The man was wearing a leather jacket and had dark hair. He looked young, maybe in his 20s or 30s. Mr. Davis joined them and gave Sarah more information. "I saw the whole thing happen from my front window," he said. "The motorcycle was going way too fast for this neighborhood. The rider was holding something in his hand while he was driving. It looked like he was using his phone." Mr. Davis shook his head in disgust. That young man was being completely reckless. Sarah thanked both witnesses and walked around the neighborhood knocking on doors. She spoke to 12 different people who lived on Elm Street and Maple Street. 3 of them had seen the black motorcycle with orange flames speeding through their neighborhood on other mornings. One woman named Mrs. Lopes said she had complained to the police about the loud motorcycle several times before. The most important witness was Mr. Williams, who lived in the house on the corner. He had a security camera mounted above his front door that recorded everything happening on the street. Mr. Williams invited Sarah inside and showed her the video footage on his computer. The camera had captured the entire accident from start to finish. Sarah watched the video several times, taking notes about everything she saw. The footage clearly showed Jake holding his phone while riding at a dangerous speed. It showed Buddy jumping in front of Eleanor to protect her. It showed the collision and Jake driving away without stopping to help. Most importantly, the camera had recorded a partial view of the motorcycle's license plate. Sarah could make out 3 letters and 2 numbers from the license plate. It was not the complete plate number, but it was enough information to start searching through the motor vehicle database. She knew that there could not be too many black motorcycles with orange flames registered in their city. Sarah felt confident that she would find the hit-and-run driver very soon. Jake Thompson sat on his old brown couch, staring at his laptop screen with nervous eyes. His hands were shaking as he typed different search words into Google. He looked for news about motorcycle accidents in Maplewood. He searched for stories about injured dogs. He checked the local police website for any reports about hit-and-run cases. So far, he had not found anything about what happened that morning, but his worry was growing stronger every minute. The black motorcycle with orange flames was parked outside his apartment building. Jake had walked around it 3 times looking for damage from the accident. There was a small dent in the front fender that had not been there before. The chrome bumper had scratches that looked fresh and new. Jake's stomach felt sick when he saw the evidence of what he had done. He thought about taking his bike to a repair shop right away, but he was afraid that would make him look guilty. Jake's cell phone buzzed with a text message from his friend Tony, who worked at the same construction site. "Hey man, where are you today?" the message said. "The boss is looking for you, and he seems pretty angry." Jake realized he had forgotten all about going to work. He had been so worried about the accident that everything else slipped his mind. Jake quickly typed back that he was sick and would not be coming in today. But Jake could not stop thinking about what had happened at the corner of Elm and Maple Street. He kept seeing the image of the old woman crying over her injured dog. He remembered the sound the dog made when his motorcycle hit it. The memory made Jake feel terrible, but he told himself that it was not really his fault. The old woman should have been more careful, he thought. She should not have been walking her dog in the street. Jake tried to watch television to distract himself, but he could not focus on anything. Every commercial break seemed to have advertisements for lawyers who helped people with accident cases. Every news program made him nervous that they might report about his hit and run. Jake changed the channel over and over, but nothing could calm his racing mind. Around noon, Jake decided to drive his regular car to the grocery store. He needed to get out of his apartment before he went crazy with worry. As he walked through the parking lot, he noticed a police car driving slowly down his street. Jake's heart started beating fast as he watched the police car continue past his building. He told himself it was just a coincidence, but deep down he was terrified that they were looking for him. At the grocery store, Jake could barely concentrate on shopping. He kept looking over his shoulder, expecting to see police officers coming to arrest him. When he reached for a box of cereal, his hands were shaking so much that he dropped it on the floor. Other customers stared at him strangely as he picked up the box and put it in his cart. Jake felt like everyone was watching him and knew what he had done. Back at his apartment, Jake paced around his small living room like a caged animal. He walked from the kitchen to the bedroom and back again dozens of times. His mind was racing with terrible thoughts about going to jail and losing his job. Jake had never been in serious trouble with the law before. He had gotten a few speeding tickets, but nothing like this. Hit and run was a serious crime that could send him to prison for years. Detective Sarah Chen sat at her computer in the police station working through her lunch break. She had been searching the motor vehicle database for 3 hours trying to find motorcycles that matched the description from the witnesses. The partial license plate number she got from the security video had narrowed down her search considerably. There were only 12 black motorcycles with orange flame designs registered in the city that had license plates containing those specific letters and numbers. Sarah printed out the list of motorcycle owners and their addresses. She studied each name carefully, looking for any clues that might help her identify the hit-and-run driver. Most of the owners were middle-aged men with clean driving records, but 3 names on the list had previous citations for reckless driving and speeding. Sarah decided to visit those 3 addresses first, since the witnesses had described the rider as young and reckless. The first address belonged to a man named Robert Martins who lived across town. When Sarah knocked on his door, a 55-year-old man answered. He was clearly too old to match the witness descriptions. The second address was for someone named Kevin Walsh, but his motorcycle had been in the repair shop for 2 weeks. That left Jake Thompson, who lived in an apartment complex on the south side of town. Sarah drove to Jake's apartment building and parked her police car outside. She walked up to the 2nd floor and knocked on apartment 2B. Inside the apartment, Jake heard the knocking and his heart nearly stopped beating. He looked through the peephole and saw a woman in a police uniform standing in the hallway. Jake's hands started shaking uncontrollably as pure terror flooded through his entire body. Jake tried to calm himself down before opening the door. He took 3 deep breaths and wiped the sweat from his forehead. When he finally opened the door, his face was pale white and his voice was shaky. "Can I help you, officer?" he asked, trying to sound normal. But Detective Chen had interviewed hundreds of guilty people during her career. She could tell immediately that Jake was nervous and hiding something. "I am Detective Chen, and I am investigating a hit-and-run accident that happened this morning," she said while watching Jake's reaction carefully. "Do you own a black motorcycle with orange flames painted on the gas tank?" Jake's face went even whiter when he heard her question. He started stuttering and could not form complete sentences. "Yes, I have a bike like that, but I did not go anywhere this morning," he lied. Detective Chen asked Jake for his full name and date of birth so she could run a background check. Jake Thompson, born March 15, 1997, he answered. Sarah wrote down the information in her notebook, but something about the name sounded familiar to her. She asked Jake where he grew up and what schools he attended. Jake told her he had lived in Maplewood his whole life and went to Lincoln Elementary School. When Detective Chen returned to the police station, she decided to do more research about Jake's background. She discovered that he had attended Lincoln Elementary School from 1998 to 2005. The principal of Lincoln Elementary during those years was a woman named Eleanor Martinez. Sarah's heart started beating faster as she realized the shocking connection. She looked up Eleanor's current address and confirmed her worst suspicions. The elderly woman whose dog had been injured in the hit-and-run accident was the same Eleanor Martinez who had been Jake's elementary school principal. Jake had no idea that he had just hurt the one person who had tried to help him during his troubled childhood years. Detective Chen knew this information would change everything about the case. Detective Sarah Chen called Jake Thompson the next morning and asked him to come to the police station for questioning. Her voice was serious but calm as she explained that she needed to ask him more questions about the hit-and-run accident. Jake's stomach dropped when he heard her request. He knew he could not refuse to come without looking even more guilty than he already did. With trembling hands, Jake agreed to meet Detective Chen at 2 p.m. that afternoon. Jake spent the morning pacing around his apartment trying to figure out what he would say. He considered lying again, but he knew the detective was smart and would probably catch him. He thought about getting a lawyer, but that would cost money he did not have. Deep down, Jake knew that his lies were falling apart and the truth would come out sooner or later. His conscience had been eating away at him for 2 days straight. At the police station, Detective Chen led Jake into a small interview room with gray walls and a metal table. The room felt cold and unwelcoming. Jake sat down in an uncomfortable chair and tried to stop his hands from shaking. Detective Chen sat across from him with a thick file folder containing all the evidence she had collected. Jake stared at the folder, wondering what information was inside it. "I have something important to tell you before we begin," Detective Chen said as she opened the folder. "The elderly woman whose dog you hit with your motorcycle is named Eleanor Martinez. Do you recognize that name?" Jake's face went completely white when he heard the name. His mouth fell open in shock and disbelief. Memories from his childhood came flooding back into his mind all at once. "Mrs. Martinez," he whispered, Jake barely able to speak. "She was my principal at Lincoln Elementary School." Detective Chen nodded her head slowly. "That is correct, Jake. The woman you heard on Tuesday morning is the same person who tried to help you when you were a troubled young boy." Jake felt like he was going to be sick as the full weight of what he had done hit him like a truck. Detective Chen told Jake that Eleanor was waiting in another room and wanted to speak with him. Jake's hands were shaking so hard he could barely stand up when the detective led him down the hallway. When they reached the other interview room, Detective Chen opened the door, and Jake saw Eleanor sitting at a table with her wooden walking cane beside her chair. Eleanor looked older and more frail than Jake remembered, but her eyes were still the same kind eyes that had looked at him with patience and understanding so many years ago. She was wearing a simple blue dress, and her gray hair was pulled back in a neat bun. When Eleanor saw Jake walk into the room, she studied his face for a long moment before speaking. "Jacob Thompson," she said in the same gentle voice that Jake remembered from his childhood. "I thought it might be you when Detective Chen told me your name." Jake collapsed into the chair across from Eleanor as tears started streaming down his face. He could not believe that he had hurt the one person who had believed in him when nobody else would. "Mrs. Martinez, I am so sorry," Jake sobbed. "I did not know it was you. I did not mean for any of this to happen." Eleanor reached across the table and placed her wrinkled hand on top of Jake's shaking hands. "I remember you as a bright boy who made some poor choices," she said softly. "It seems like you are still making poor choices, Jacob." Jake Thompson sat in the interview room crying harder than he had cried since he was a small child. All the guilt and shame he had been carrying for the past 2 days came pouring out of him. He looked at Eleanor Martinez sitting across from him and remembered all the time she had helped him during his difficult school years. She had stayed after school to help him with his reading when other teachers had given up on him. She had defended him when other students complained about his behavior. "Mrs. Martinez, I am so sorry," Jake said between his sobs. "I was being stupid and reckless. I was using my phone while riding and going way too fast. When I saw you and Buddy in the crosswalk, it was too late to stop. I panicked and drove away instead of helping you. I have been sick with worry ever since it happened." Jake confessed everything to Eleanor and Detective Chen without holding back any details. Eleanor listened quietly as Jake told his story. Her heart was sad, but she was not surprised that Jake had made such poor choices. She remembered him as a boy who acted without thinking about the consequences of his actions. But she also remembered that deep down Jake had a good heart when he was not being foolish or angry. After Jake finished confessing, Eleanor spoke to him in her calm teacher voice. "Jacob, you have always been impulsive and made decisions without thinking," she said. "But running away after hurting Buddy was the worst choice you could have made. You left an old woman alone with her injured pet when you should have stopped to help." Eleanor paused and looked directly into Jake's eyes. "However, I can see that you are truly sorry for what you did. That gives me hope that you can still change and become a better person." Detective Chen arrested Jake and charged him with leaving the scene of an accident, reckless driving, and animal cruelty. The judge who heard Jake's case was not impressed by his excuse that he panicked. Judge Williams sentenced Jake to 18 months in jail, 5 years of probation, and 500 hours of community service. Jake was also ordered to pay all of Buddy's medical bills, which totaled $8,400. The veterinary surgery to repair Buddy's broken leg had been expensive and complicated. During his time in jail, Jake received an unexpected visitor. Eleanor Martinez came to see him 3 months after his sentencing. She told Jake that Buddy had recovered from his injuries and was walking normally again. Eleanor also told Jake that she forgave him for what he had done, but that forgiveness did not erase the consequences of his actions. She encouraged Jake to use his time in jail to think about the kind of person he wanted to be when he got out. When Jake was released from jail after serving 15 months, Eleanor surprised him again. She had spoken to the director of the Maplewood Animal Rescue Center and helped Jake get a job there. The job paid minimum wage, but it gave Jake a chance to work with injured and abandoned animals. Every day, Jake saw dogs and cats that had been hurt by careless people, just like he had hurt Buddy. Working at the animal rescue changed Jake completely. He learned to be gentle and patient with frightened animals. He discovered that helping others felt much better than being selfish and reckless. Jake also started speaking at local schools about the dangers of reckless driving and making impulsive decisions. He told students his story and warned them about how one moment of poor judgment could change their lives forever. Eleanor often attended these school presentations and felt proud that her former student had finally learned to make good choices.